This is the Garmin Fenix 8. It's the latest flagship smartwatch from Garmin, and quite simply, it's the best golf watch I have ever used, which makes it kind of odd that I'm gonna say most of you probably shouldn't buy it. In this review, I'm gonna cover all the golf features. I'm gonna talk about my experience with it, but most importantly, I'm gonna talk about how it compares to the Epic series of watches, as well as the Garmin S70, which is Garmin's flagship dedicated golf watch. So if you've been thinking about buying a Garmin watch for a while, and if one of the big reasons you were looking to buy one is for golf, then I think you're gonna find this to be the most helpful video you watch today. All right, because I don't want to waste your time, let's just get a couple things out of the way immediately. If you are looking for a golf-only watch, you are looking for a watch dedicated to the golf course, and you do not plan to wear this day to day, don't go get this watch. You can go get the Garmin S70, which starting out at $649 is considerably cheaper than this one, which starts out at $1,000. In nearly all the ways that matter for golf, the Fenix 8 is identical to the S70. The S70 is just cheaper. So if you're looking for a watch just for golf, but you want the most full-featured option, go get that. And to go even further, if you're just looking for GPS yardages and to keep score, you don't even have to spend that much. For a few $100s, you can go get one of the lower-end Garmin models like the Garmin S12 or the Garmin S42, which are both still excellent for what they do. Or you can take a look at something like the Voice Caddy T11 Pro, which does just about everything the Garmin does for about half the price. There's definitely pros and cons and trade-offs, so I will link to my full review of that watch below, but just know that if you're just looking for basic GPS yardages, you don't have to spend a ton of money. Most people are not looking for, nor do they need, an $1,100 golf watch. But if you're buying this watch, the golf is only part of it. So let me see if I can do my best to explain what I mean, talk about all the things I've loved about it, the things that have worked, the things I don't like about it, how it works from a golf standpoint, and also help make it a little bit more clear if you should buy this, the S70, or potentially an Epix Gen 2, which has like 90% of the same features as this, but is half the price. So let's jump. Let's actually get to the review. Let's talk about the watch. All right, first up, packaging, presentation, first impressions. It looks like a Garmin product. It comes in the same gray box. You open it up, you can see the watch. Nothing fancy, nothing special. It's very similar to every other Garmin product I have used and unboxed. To give you some context, for the last year and a half, I've personally been wearing the Epix Gen 2, which essentially is a very similar watch that's 2 generations old. Also, to get rid of any confusion, the Fenix 8 is essentially what the Epix used to be. They're getting rid of the Epix line, they're rolling it into the Fenix name, so this is essentially, for all intents and purposes, like the Epix 3. This is what that would be. Look and feel-wise, it is very similar to the older Epix models. There's technically a slightly smaller bezel, which makes the screen slightly larger. I will say compared to my Epix 2, the screen quality on this definitely does look a little bit sharper and is on par with what you would find with the Epix Pro, which is essentially just the newer model of the watch that I have. One of the big things you're gonna notice right off the bat is there have definitely been some user interface tweaks. So they have updated it, they have modernized it, and now that I'm used to it, I really like it. I think it looks really good, and it definitely makes it feel like a more modern watch compared to the older Epix models. One thing I've personally always struggled with when it comes to Garmin watches is the fact that I don't love most of the watch faces they use. Coming from an Apple Watch, I loved how customizable they were. I loved how I could just swipe to have different save screens for different uses. You can't do that as easily with the Garmin watches, and they've always been a little bit difficult to customize. So 2 big improvements I've noticed off the bat is the new default screen is called Iron Grit. I like that more than any other Garmin interface I have used, and they've also made it much easier to customize both the data and the color scheme on the watch. So I found it really easy to customize this watch face to my liking to give me the data that I want to see most on a day-to-day basis. And even though there have been some changes to the UI, if you're a previous Garmin user, it's honestly not going to take you very long to feel comfortable with it because things have changed, but they haven't changed that much. So as I mentioned, if you're just looking for a golf watch, this isn't for you. So this video is really going to be for the small subset of people that are looking for a golf watch and a full-time fitness and smartwatch. And that's really where this thing shines. So I've said for a long time, when it comes to like fitness and activities and tracking your health, this thing blows an Apple Watch out of the water. When it comes to being a smartwatch and apps and connectivity and user experience, the Apple Watch blows this out of the water. Although that gap is getting a little bit smaller with the Fenix 8 because there is now a built-in microphone as well as a built-in assistant. So you can take calls on this now, which is something you previously couldn't do. If you're the type of person that likes to listen to music without headphones on your watch, you can do that now. If you found it tricky with previous Garmin watches to go through the menus and find the thing you're looking for, you can now use the voice assistant, which makes it pretty easy to do things like start a timer or set an alarm. So while from a smartwatch perspective, this is still definitely not an Apple Watch, it's the best watch that Garmin has made to date. And so if that's one of the things that's been keeping you on the fence from switching over to the Garmin ecosystem, this might be just enough to get you to push over the edge. But because this is a golf review, I want to make sure I touch on all the golf things. The problem is there's not a whole lot for me to report. and that's a good thing. Like I said, essentially this has all of the same features of the S70. I did another video that I will link to below where I talk about the minor differences between the S70 and the Fenix 8, but when it comes to the things that matter, accuracy, app integration, shot tracking, accessory integration with like the Z30 rangefinder or the CT10 sensors, they're identical. They both do all of it, and it's great. I will say the Fenix 8 is a nice improvement over the Epix 2 in terms of user interface. You get some of the updated graphics that the S70 has, and when it prompts you for things like keeping score or entering your shot data or club data or anything like that, everything just looks slightly more elevated. It's still a little bit different from the S70. The S70 has some nice graphics, but part of that is because the S70 uses predominantly a touchscreen, whereas this uses predominantly buttons, even though both of them do have a touchscreen. So let's talk about that for a second. For me personally, I love having the extra button setup. I'm not a touchscreen watch person for the most part, so I like to use the buttons to scroll through and get the data I need. You can certainly do that with the S70, but with only a 3-button setup, it definitely asks you to rely more on the touchscreen, and that's one thing that might sway you one way or another depending on how you like to interact with your watch. Hey, real quick, is this valuable, but you're still not sure if this is the right GPS watch for you? Go take our 30-second quiz. You're gonna answer a few questions about what you're looking for, and I'm gonna give you my best recommendation on the GPS watch that I think is going to be the best fit for your needs. The link is right below. You can go do it while you're watching this video, and I think it'll be super useful. All right, back to it. On the course, the Fenix 8 was everything I expected it to be. I can get accurate GPS yardages, which I have found to be extremely accurate, as you would expect from Garmin. You can tap the numbers, and it'll go from giving you actual GPS yardages to plays-like numbers. And if you swipe up, you can see the different factors that it is taking into account when it gives you those plays-like numbers. So this is one of the big improvements that was brought over from the S70. So it factors in slope, which is how high or low the green is relative to where you are. It will factor in wind data if you're connected to the Garmin Golf app, and then it will also take into account atmosphere. So what's the weather, what's the temperature, and what altitude are you at? Being able to see these elements so clearly just helps you to have a little bit more faith in the accuracy of those plays-like numbers. The Fenix 8 also has some great visual indicators, so it'll give you a line based on where your expected average drive distance will be. And then on your iron and approach shots, it will give you a box that gives you an expected landing area. So it essentially just gives you a little bit more information that can help with your club selection. Speaking of club selection, there is built-in shot tracking in this watch, just as there was on other high-end Garmin watches. And honestly, in my 3 rounds with it so far, I've certainly found it to be a little bit more reliable than it was on my Epix Gen 2 and on par with what I've experienced with the S70. After you've played 5 rounds using shot tracking, it unlocks a virtual caddy feature, so your watch will make recommendations based on what club you should hit given your circumstances. So one of the coolest features of the virtual caddy is just how smart it is. So this came over from the S70, so let's say it knows that you're terrible hitting out of bunkers. It will make a club selection for you that will try and specifically keep you out of bunkers. So while maybe normally you would hit an 8-iron, it might say, you know what, we're gonna hit a 9, we're gonna lay up just a little bit short because you're better off in the fairway than if you end up in that bunker because we know you're probably gonna add 4 extra strokes if you end up in the sand. As far as I know, there's no other shot tracking solution that does this with their virtual caddy and is a nice feature of Garmin. The watch does a great job of automatically prompting you to enter in your score. It recognizes when you move to the next hole in the next tee box, and I have had 0 issues with that. All the Garmin watches for a few generations now seem to do a really good job of tracking where you are on the golf course, but if for some reason you end up on the wrong hole, the menu system is very clear, and it's very easy to switch over to whatever hole you are actually on. Speaking of menus, this is one area where Garmin just really excels. Using that Voice Caddy T11 Pro, which I talked about, which is very full-featured and much cheaper than most of the Garmin options, I just never felt comfortable with it. Even though it can pretty much do everything the Garmin can in many cases, it just doesn't make it as easy to do those things. And that's one thing that Garmin has really nailed. Whether you want to change your score, see your round statistics, add shots, change holes, whatever it is, it's super easy to do just by clicking the menu, scrolling down, picking what you want, and away you go. That's one reason I continue to be drawn to Garmin devices, because they just nail some of that user experience stuff that a lot of newer or smaller brands just don't always quite get right. If you're someone who's very much in the Garmin ecosystem, if you have a Z30 rangefinder, just know this works great with it. So if you're not familiar with this, this is essentially the newest Garmin rangefinder, which will pair with your watch and give you accurate GPS yardages to the pin based on where you shot it. So if you shoot the flag and it's in the front right of the green, you can then go look at the green view on your watch and it's gonna show that pin in the exact location that it is, that you just shot. At least that's what it's supposed to do. It works pretty well from an accuracy standpoint, but the connection between the rangefinder and the watch and that interface, that is seamless and works wonderfully. And if you want to know more about that rangefinder and see my full review, you can go check it out at the link below. So real quick, before I get into my experience with some of the other features of this watch, I just want to tie the bow on the golf side of things because I know that's the question that so many of you have. If you have a Garmin S70 or an Epix Gen 2 and you're thinking about buying this just as an upgrade to your golf watch, not for any of the fitness or any of the other features, you don't need to. It's pretty much going to be the same. Yes, as I mentioned, there are some minor updates, mostly user experience type stuff over the Epix 2, but when it comes to the S70, you're not really gaining anything, and you do lose my favorite feature of the S70, which is the score around the bezel. So you can look at a glance and you can kind of see what your score, you can see you're trending using that 18-hole numbered bezel that goes around the watch. This is especially helpful if you like to play, say, Stableford and use the watch to keep track of your score. Being able to see that at a glance is really nice, and that is something you don't get on either the Epix or the Fenix series of watches. If you don't yet have a Garmin golf watch and you are in the market for one, well, we need to tick some boxes before we figure out if this is right for you. Like I said, if all you care about is basic scores, numbers, and some GPS data, you can get cheaper watches. If you want all of the high-end golf features, but you only plan to use this on the golf course, you can go get the S70. So now that we've established this, if you're still with me and you're like, yes, I want something high-end, I want all the golf features, and I want something that I can wear day to day to help me with all my fitness and as a smartwatch, yada, yada, yada. So that now leaves us with two options. You can get the Fenix 8, which starts at $1,000. This version is the 47mm sapphire screen, so it's $1,100. Or currently, for about $600, you can get an Epix 2, which, like I said, is about 2 generations older than this, and it's what I've been using up until this point. I'm gonna be totally honest, the difference between this and that one that's 2 generations old was not as dramatic as I expected it to be. Yes, this one is absolutely better. Hands down, like, user experience is better, everything's a little bit faster, the screen looks a little bit better, the golf features, like I said, have gotten some of the enhancements that they got in the S70, but it's mostly pretty similar. From a day-to-day standpoint, how I use my watch, which is mostly for golf and then fitness tracking, pretty similar. Like, not that much difference. The Fenix 8 has a newer and better heart rate sensor. It's got the built-in microphone. It's got dive capability, so if you're someone that wants to go like scuba diving with it, you can do this. But generally speaking, it's very similar to the Epix 2, which you can get for almost half the price. I wanted to make sure I said that because for a lot of people that want kind of the best of both worlds, you want a really good fitness watch and you want a really good golf watch, that Epix 2 I think is the best fit. There's the Epix 2 Pro, which is the newer model of the Epix 2 I'm talking about, but those I personally have not seen come down quite as bit. I've still seen those in like the $800-900 range, and if you're spending that much, then I think you're better off just going ahead and getting the Fenix 8. But if you're in that like $600 range and you're like, you know what, I like the idea of the S70, but I want to wear it and get all those extra fitness features, then I think the Epix is a good option. And that's not to say the S70 isn't a good fitness watch, but if you're someone that really lives and breathes tracking and you're using this as your activity, your health base camp, and you want as much information as possible, then I really do think it's worth upgrading to either that older Epix model or the new Fenix model. So now that I've said all of that, how has my general day-to-day experience with the Fenix 8 been? I'm just gonna kind of share some of the general thoughts that I've had, because like I said, there are all sorts of reviews out there that are gonna go way more in depth on all the features and all the health and all of the different things. And so I'm just gonna give you kind of the bullet points of some of the things I haven't necessarily seen covered that I think you might wanna know about. Okay, first off, I've noticed a bunch of comments online from people that have said their watches have been really buggy and the experience has not been very good. I've not really experienced any of that. I've had 2 software updates to the watch since I started using it, and the only real bug I had came with a run where I was racing against a previous run that I had done, and some of the stats and metrics were a little bit messed up, and that's something that's small and was a very specific use case. But when it comes to like day-to-day use, it's been rock solid. I've had no crashes, I've had no major bugs, it's been a joy to use, and so that's been really nice after being a little nervous seeing some of the early comments from early adopters. As far as battery life goes, this is excellent. This is one of the biggest upgrades over using an Apple Watch. I've gone 8 days. I just recently charged it this morning for a little bit so that I could prepare to do this video, but I went 8 days without having to charge it. That was wearing it every single night for sleep tracking. That was doing at least 1 workout a day, 2 rounds of golf, and being generally on the watch a lot as I continue to use it and get familiar with it. So 8 days, like, that's insane. Like, battery life should not be an issue for anybody here. There's some of the user interface things that I've really just truly like grasped onto and really like. So every day I've got a steps goal and I've got a floors climb goal. So with this new screen, I can very easily track where I'm at with both of those goals. And every time I double it, it'll give me kind of a fun graphic. So this is one of the main reasons why I ended up switching to Garmin. I got into the Apple Watch for the health stuff with closing your rings and all of that, but very quickly you realize that that's pretty like consumer level. It's very easy to game. All the data I get about my health and my activities and my acute load and what I'm doing and my training status. That's the stuff I love about Garmin. And with the Fenix 8, I feel like they've really perfected the balance between making it fun and enjoyable and make me want to go work out while also giving me all the in-depth data I want when I'm analyzing my health and fitness. My biggest complaint about the watch so far has to do with the heart rate sensor. And this is an issue that I also had on the Epix 2, so it may just be a me issue. But what I've found is that in the early minutes of my run, it doesn't track my heart rate properly. So what it'll do is it'll get up to like 120 beats per minute, maybe 125, and it'll stay there for a while, and then it will immediately jump up to like 165 or 170 or wherever I am. And often on my workouts, I'll do, say, a mile sprint on the treadmill, and it's not until I'm almost done with my mile that it actually tracks my heart rate properly, which can affect some of the metrics and some of the data. And so I constantly feel like I'm trying to adjust it on my wrist, and sometimes it works better than others, and sometimes it reads faster than others, but it's usually just the first like 5 minutes of a run where it doesn't always seem to get that heart rate data dead on. For other activities, it seems to be great and very responsive and definitely a nice step up from the Epix 2, but for some reason with the beginning of those runs, it doesn't seem to track properly. And again, I need to go to Garmin support and see if there's something I can figure out with that, but it's a little bit of a frustration because I was hoping that this was going to solve that issue, which is something I've been experiencing on my older watch as well. One feature that seems like it could be nice is you can take screenshots as well as voice recordings and voice memos from your watch now. The problem is you can't easily get them off your watch and onto your computer, especially if you have a Mac, which I learned trying to get screenshots off of this for this video. It will not automatically recognize this as a drive unless you are using third-party software. It's a little bit easier if you have a PC where you can just scroll through the folders, find what you need, and drag it over. But that's one of those features you would hope they would update where you can just go into the Garmin app on your phone and be able to access those and drag them over. But honestly, I think the biggest thing I've noticed about the Fenix 8 is just how much I've enjoyed continuing to use the Garmin ecosystem. The Garmin Connect app got a big refresh a few months back, and so now it's even easier to use and customize, and seeing all of that data in there and getting all of that sleep data and all the activity data and all the stuff all in one place really allows me to get a good snapshot of where I'm at in terms of health and fitness. I've like gone all in on the Garmin ecosystem. I've got the Garmin scale, I've got the Garmin blood pressure monitor, and it takes all of that data, puts it in the app, and makes it very easy to see, very easy to spot trends, and very easy to track your general health and fitness. The Fenix 8 is essentially just taking all the stuff I loved about my old watch, the Epix 2, refining it, adding some minor improvements, minor updates, and making it that much better. And so this really is, for me and my goals right now, the best smartwatch I've ever used. As someone who upgraded from the Epix 2 to the Fenix 8, how do I feel? I will say it met expectations, it did not exceed expectations, in the sense that it didn't provide the dramatic day-to-day difference that I was maybe expecting it to, but I'm also very glad to have this and have enjoyed using it immensely. Next to my phone and my computer, it's become the piece of technology that I use and interact with the most, and honestly, it's probably the piece of technology that I enjoy using and interacting with the most, especially as I have seen a notable improvement in my own health and fitness, which I honestly largely attribute to just getting into the Garmin ecosystem. So, should you spend $1,100 on a golf watch? Probably not. There are other options that are cheaper. But if you're like me, if you're taking your health seriously, if you want an ecosystem where you can track all the things and you want one watch that can do it all, honestly, the fact this is such a full-featured golf watch and it does so many other things so well is kind of mind-blowing that there's this much technology packed into here. If that's what you're looking for and you're willing to pay a premium for it, then I 1,000% recommend this watch. It is fantastic. If you're okay with something that's a couple generations older but still does basically 90% of the things that matter, 90% as well as the Fenix 8, go look at one of the older Epix models. I don't think you're going to be disappointed. And if you just want the best of the best when it comes to golf and you don't care about having a day-to-day smartwatch, then go get the S70. With that, my name is Sean Ogle. I'm the founder of this thing here at Breaking 80, where we talk about cool golf products and cool golf courses. If you got some value out of this, maybe consider hitting the subscribe button, thumbs up, like, comment, share, do all of the things. And if you have any questions about any of this, let me know. I've used this pretty extensively, so I'm sure with so many different elements to a product like this that you could cover, I missed a ton of things. So if you have questions or if you want me to do like a follow-up just Q&A video about this watch, I'd be happy to do it. So drop those below and I will do my very best to answer every single one. If you're still not sure if this is the right GPS golf watch for you or something else, go take our 30-second quiz. You're going to answer a few questions and I'm going to give you my best recommendation based on your needs. And with that, have a great day. We'll see you in the next video. Peace.